to be human is to be hardwired to be creative. And the difference between people who we overtly and obviously see as, oh, they are obviously creative, and maybe if we don't think of our own selves as creative, is that the difference is that you may not be exercising your creative competency.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Rebase Show, the show for profession with purpose. And if this is your first time joining us on Rebase, then I'm your host, Sean P. Martin. And this show, the purpose of this show is to equip you with the tools and the tips, the stories, the wisdom that's going to help you create more success and more fulfillment in your career and in your life. And today I'm really excited, super excited to jump into the conversation we're about to have with our guest today, Miss Natalie Nixon, PhD. Natalie is an in-demand keynote speaker. She is the author of the award-winning book, The Creativity Leap, Unleash Curiosity, Improvisation, and Intuition at Work. She's the President and Creativity Strategist at Figure 8 Thinking, which is a creativity and foresight strategy firm that advises leaders on how to achieve transformative business results. And as you'll probably hear in our conversation, Natalie has a diverse and varied background, which is of particular interest to me because she's been in areas like anthropology, fashion, academia, strategic design, management consulting, and all of this is tied around one common theme, which is creativity and how it benefits us in the workplace, how it benefits companies. So I'm saying it probably far worse than she's going to be able to. So without further ado, Natalie Nixon, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rebase Show. How are you today?
Hi, Sean. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. And I found out about you, Natalie, several months ago around the release of your book, actually, and you were on another podcast. And I thought, wow, somebody who is promoting creativity as such a driver of business results and fulfilling work, I need to speak with this person immediately. And, COVID sort of got in the way of some of that. But
yes,
what I love so much about your book, and I am a huge proponent of creativity and finding creativity in places where maybe we don't normally think about it, but you take things to a whole nother level. And I want to jump right in if that's okay with you.
Yeah. One of the goals. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. No, go for it. Go for it.
No. Well, just to build on your observation that I was trying to take things to a different level. One of the goals of writing The Creativity Leap was to, I guess, kind of democratize the way we think about creativity, because it has been my experience that often we silo or ghettoize creativity in the arts. And so I have been privy to part of conversations where people will say, oh, I'm not a creative type because I can't fill in the blank, draw, paint, sing, dance, etc. Or in some companies, there are remarks such as, oh, the creatives will take care of it after we finish, all the important business stuff, right? And
all the business work, right?
right. And actually, one of the monikers on my business, the moniker on my business card is that strategy is creative. I see that there is a business ROI of creativity. And so in writing the book, I wanted to democratize the way we think about creativity to make sure that we don't ghettoize and silo creativity only in the arts, because I don't think that's fair to artists. I don't think it's beneficial to our society at large. I think that artists happen to be excellent at wrestling with the ambiguity of the creative process. But if we think about creativity in the following way, as toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems, then we quickly begin to see that we're having to be intentional about being creative throughout every single day, and to be an exceptional engineer, entrepreneur, plumber, esthetician, farmer, you've got to be super creative.
Right. Business owner, to your point, right? You said strategy is creative. That's, I love that you jumped in there, because that was going to be kind of my first question was, people who see or who are sort of ghettoizing, as you said, creativity to the arts, or people who say, I'm not a creative type, as if it is an archetype, right?
Right.
And just like, you're either creative or you're not. What do you say to those folks? And you did kind of answer this already, but what do you say to somebody who says, I'm not a creative type?
I say, here's another way of thinking about it, that to be human is to be hardwired to be creative. And the difference between people who we overtly and obviously see as, oh, they are obviously creative, and maybe if we don't think of our own selves as creative, is that the difference is that you may not be exercising your creative competency. I really view creativity as a competency, as something that we can get better at. And there are certain capabilities that really accentuate and amplify our ability to be creative. But if you think back to when you were a kid, if you have children, if you look at your own kids, there is this propensity to toggle between wonder and maybe not rigor in the way we think about rigor as older we get, but definitely there's a real intensity and immersion to get really good at something. I think back to my sister and my sister is 20 months younger than me. And we learned really quickly to dare not say to our mom, Mommy, I'm bored, because she would say, only boring people get bored, which was a real insult to us. So we quickly figured out, oh, better not say I'm bored. And, I definitely grew up in an era where you could send your kids out to play during the summertime, and our moms would say, you got to be back in the house by the time the streetlights come on. I know it's a very different time these days, but still, we could entertain ourselves building mud pies. And so there was a wonder about that, but there was also a bit of rigor in terms of the intense focus we had on figuring out how to design different shapes or bake food with it. And I maybe it would be helpful also at this point if I kind of explain how I'm thinking about wonder and how I think about rigor. Wonder is
for sure
about dreaming and audacity and asking really big blue sky questions, and deep curiosity, asking what if. And it's also about awe and pausing. And pausing is not something we are particularly good at in our society. It's something that I think we had something we were able to take advantage of probably at the beginning of the COVID quarantine. And that quickly slipped away from a lot of us. But that's how I think about wonder on the one hand. And rigor is about discipline and deep focus and time on task. Rigor is not the same thing as rigidity. So when we are rigid, we get fixated on the one way to do things. And I talk about rigor as being super aware of context. So when we are rigorous, we still are able to adapt according to how the external environment might change. Even though we're super focused and disciplined on drilling down our energy and our focus on something, we still have the ability to adapt. When we are rigid, we're not so great at adapting. Rigor is also often very solitary work, and it's not particularly sexy, but it's so essential to all creative processes.
Yeah, it's that context you mentioned is minding your surroundings, right? It's
yes.
What are the conditions you're working in? Yeah,
yes,
that's great. Coming from an engineering background, I've got a lot of familiarity with agility in organizations and in software. And a lot of people view agile processes as almost no rules, but it's not. It's like you said, it's the difference between rigidity and rigor, where agility is not chaos.
Right.
And, rigor isn't chaos. You don't need to be rigid just because your rigor was a little bit chaotic. It's finding those boundaries, right? And I think you mentioned that in the book a lot, right? Is what are the boundaries of your work?
Yeah, well, creativity loves constraints, and creativity is not about doing whatever you feel like. There have to be some rules that they're what I call, I think, especially if you think about our work, if we think about the way we design companies and organizations, it's important to have fluid structures. If the structures are too controlling, then it's too restrictive and people suffocate. right? But we do need to know the boundaries that we can rebound against. I've been, my work is informed a lot by chaotic systems thinking. It's something that stems from chaos theory and complexity theory. And a chaord, CHAORD, is a word that D. Hock made up. And D. Hock was the first president of Visa, the credit card company. And when back in the early 60s, 1960s, when he was invited to lead this global organization based on the virtual exchange of currency, was pretty avant-garde and radical back then. He thought, I don't want to create an organization that will just be represented by a bunch of boxes and arrows and an org chart. This is going to be something of a scale that we really haven't embraced before. And he was a big naturalist. He was taking a walk through the woods. And he thought, what if I could design an organization that reflected more of what we see in nature? And in nature, we see some chaos. We also see some order. And he did a mashup of the two words and called it a chaord. And as it turns out, it's really connected to chaos theory. And once you learn about chaotic systems, you see them everywhere. It's the way our bodies heal. All chaotic, complex systems are adaptive, they're self-organizing, and they are emergent. And that's what we see in jazz music. It's a chaotic system. There's some chaos and there's some order. That's what we see in improvisation. That's what we see in the ways forests and the woods emerge over millennia, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see how I've really been influenced by that and how I think about creativity, right?
Yeah.
If I'm talking about creativity is toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems, well, the wonder piece is very much connected to the chaos or randomness, and the rigor piece is very much connected to order or structure.
Yeah, there's so many questions I want to ask right now.
Sure.
First of all, I love that saying, creativity loves boundaries, because it struck me because it's counterintuitive to the way that I've thought about creativity in the past. And not that, we should just do whatever we want, to your point, but creativity in my mind is, it's free and flowing, and it's, expansive, and, all those things seem to suggest that there are not boundaries, but the boundaries help us with the rigor, and they help to inform our creativity. I mean, one random example, we're recording this conversation right now. We have so much time, and that is a boundary on the creativity, which is, again, I have a million questions and they're not all going to fit in this episode. But
right.
One of the other things that you mentioned, and actually I do want to take a quick step back, because you mentioned a few things just a few minutes ago around creativity being audacious, right?
Yes.
And creativity asking good questions around, like, what if? And then in explaining that example, and I'm sorry, the gentleman's name who was the first president of Visa, what was his name?
D. Hock.
D. Hock.
Who thought of chaotic systems? Yes.
Yes. So first of all, think about Visa way back when, and how audacious Visa's plan for, virtual exchange of currency was. So you have to be creative to do something that audacious. We think about it now as just a mainstay of our society. But you also said, as he was walking through nature, he thought, what if?
That's right.
I point those out just for the folks listening, because already you've got some great examples of just where in your career or in your business, in your team, could you ask, what if? And then what are some of the audacious things you're doing? I love that.
Yeah, I think that's such an important question. Where in your career and your business could you ask what if? And also notice that so many times creativity really is, and I have a chapter in the book, The Creativity Leap, about the value of the remix. Our teachers are everywhere. So, the inspiration that struck D. Hock by borrowing something that he observed happening in nature and asking, how might I incorporate that into the way we work together in a company? So much that, how many times have you seen a really cool innovation and you've either said, I thought of that a few years ago, but you didn't do anything with the idea. Or you think, that's such a simple, brilliant idea. It's beautiful in its simplicity. I could have thought of that, right? So it's so much of creativity is about the remix. It's about the mashup. It's about doing what in design thinking we call lateral thinking. It's borrowing from near and far adjacencies to understand, how might something that we see happening in the fashion world all the time look like in the context of education, right? Or something that's done in the food and bev and restaurant industry. How might it look like in healthcare? For example, there's actually it was a great essay by Atul Gawande, who's a physician. He's also a writer. He writes for, I think he still writes for the New Yorker magazine. And back in 2012, he wrote a phenomenal essay called "What Healthcare," I think it was called "What Big Healthcare Can Learn from the Cheesecake Factory Restaurant." And his whole point in writing that essay was that, every single day at every single Cheesecake Factory restaurant around the world, there is consistency of product and service. And yet, if you go to the back of the house, if you go into the kitchen, it looks like chaos. It doesn't look like the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. Yet they seamlessly deliver consistent food. And then he said, the last time I was in the ER, it felt chaotic. It felt like the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. And we don't have such a great track record all the time in healthcare of consistency and the way we're delivering great healthcare experiences. So he said, what if there was something that hospital administration, healthcare could learn from the Cheesecake Factory restaurant? That's an example of a great what if question of something that was actually extended upon. Now there's all sorts of collaborations between the healthcare sector and the food and bev and hospitality industry and service design work. That's a great example of that sort of mashup.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now I'm, my brain's working of like all the different things that could be borrowed, right? Like just like you said, the perception of front of house versus back of house and how that could be implemented to provide more confidence for patients and their families and everything like that. If you have less chaos, in the front of house, so to speak, and then their service delivery is just,
or treating patients like guests. Right?
Yes.
Treating patients like guests and how that begins to shift automatically how a person feels walking into an environment where they have a lot of fear. There's a lot of unknowns. They're scared. They don't feel well, and how that would begin to shift the experience.
Yeah. And to even that point, what are other situations where people feel uncomfortable or scared or fearful or uncertain? Like, what are other industries where you have your customers or stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, in that state? How do those industries deal with that? And how could you do that in healthcare? That's so wonderful. And by the way, I've only thought that I've had that idea years ago. I've only had that happen at least once a week for probably my entire life. So it definitely could feel you on that.
Now that's where the rigor comes in, right? Because I didn't think of that. I didn't take the additional steps. For example, Sarah Blakely is the founder and CEO of Spanx. Now, Spanx is an elegantly simple and brilliant idea where, she will self-effacingly say, I just cut off the bottoms of some pantyhose. And there are a lot of women who might have thought of that and maybe even got as far as doing that, but they didn't take it to the next stage of all the prototypes that she developed, all of the tenacity that she had to seek out different factories to make samples and then to check out textile mills who would develop the right blend of an elastomeric fiber, filament fiber with a polyester fiber to create just the right type of firmness, and then convincing a big time department store, I think it was Neiman's was the first department store that carried her product to carry such a bizarre product. But it was the proof was all in how the customer felt and looked at it. So the behind the scenes tenacity and rigor that she brought to that, in addition to the wonder, right, that with the idea that first popped into her head, is a great example of, well, I could have done that. Yeah, but you didn't, right? You didn't. And it requires not just the wonder, but also the rigor.
Right. Coming up with the idea is fine and it's great. And I actually recommend that people write down ideas when they come to them, whatever the ideas are, because trains your brain, at least from what we know, that trains your brain to come up with more ideas because it says, oh, you're rewarding me by
That's right.
recording this
That's
idea.
right.
So, but
That's
the
right.
idea is only so much. And on a side note for any listeners, if you can find a video or whatnot of Sarah Blakely's particular example of rigor, it's really quite inspiring and moving. As I know you've probably heard it many times now. If you're referencing that story, I know asked family and friends to buy up all of her inventory at first so that she could show sales. She took her stock into Neiman Marcus and like found the right places, like monitored foot traffic so she'd be in the right spots. So rigor is, I think, the getting down to business portion of creativity that so many of us who like to be creative or would like to be more creative may miss out on. So what are some of the key things that you think that are around rigor that people who want to be more creative or businesses who are open to adopting and supporting more creativity, what are some of the key points with rigor that they should have in place or consider putting in place? And obviously they should get the book, but what are some of the top tips for rigor when somebody's actually executing on that, as you mentioned, it kind of isolating sometimes work?
Yeah, well, definitely in the Creativity Leap, I balance out a lot of inspiring anecdotes with practical techniques and tips at the end of each chapter. But rigor, sometimes rigor shows up as very extensive, deep focus work, which, by the way, we don't always give ourselves or our teams the time to do that deep focus work, especially when we're in kind of a work churn and we're running from meeting to meeting. Google infamously used to do something called 20% time, and they don't do it anymore, but they used to allow for a fifth of people, sound like, once of a 5-day work week, one day out of a 5-day work week, where people were allowed to tinker and to delve into the side project that they were kind of wondering about. And one of the things that was birthed from that was Gmail. Another thing that was birthed from that I learned from reading Annie Jean Baptiste's great book, which I have up on my shelf. I just forgot the name of it. It's called Building for Everyone, or Designing for Everyone, Building for Everyone. The whole DEI initiative and inclusive design initiative came out of the Google's 20% time as well. So you have to be intentional about designing space and time for the rigor. And there's always the excuse that there's not enough time. But I'll tell you, when I was a professor for 16 years. I naively decided to earn a PhD while working full time, emphasis on the word naively. And it was hard. And like everyone else, had 24 hours in a day. The rigor in terms of the time intentionally that I had to build in meant that some days, 2 mornings out of a week, I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and work from like 4:30 to 6:30 a.m. and then get on with the work of my day. I got married probably a year and a half after I started my PhD. So I was a newlywed, a new stepmom, and had to say no a lot of time to going out to see a movie or that sort of thing, which fortunately my family was super understanding about. But rigor does require sacrifice. It requires that solo alone time to do that deep work. But it's also incredible to me how much my clients learn that you also can do what I call rigor sprints. So you can reserve 20 minutes where you turn off all notifications. You don't have any food or soda pop in front of you. And you just put on a timer and you do a draft of an article that you're thinking about, or you read something, or you work on an Excel sheet, whatever your jam is that you need to do deep focus work on. So there are many ways you can slice and dice rigor, but you do have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I love that. Paul Graham, who is heavily involved in Y Combinator, calls it maker time, manager time, and that difference between managers who are going meeting to meeting to meeting, and I don't believe he uses the word the creatives, but some of your individual contributors who are doing the creative work or the heads down work and why they need that dedicated heads down time. I love that you use the Google example of Gmail and all those other things. I've given some talks in the past talking about innovation and providing that time. Facebook has some really good hackathon stories of features that have come out through that dedicated heads down time without interruption. The ability to tag somebody in a comment on Facebook was proposed by an intern. They already had it, and like you could tag somebody in a post, and then an intern said, what if we could do that? What if?
Yes.
What if we could do that in the comments? And like everybody in product and engineering looked at each other like, why didn't we think of that? So, well, but it came during that time.
There's literally nothing bad that follows the phrase, I wonder. I wonder what would happen when, if, right? That kind of musing is super powerful.
Yeah. I'd love to use that as a bit of a springboard, because one of my favorite chapters in your book is the chapter Ask a Better Friggin' Question.
Yes.
And we've talked a little bit about the what if question or the I wonder if question. And honestly, just the bibliography from your book, I'm like, well, now I've got like another backlog of books to read, because you reference some really good examples. But what could be an example that you've seen of maybe a subpar question that somebody's asking, and then what a better version of that question is?
That's a great question. I actually gave a keynote today, and there was a similar question about how could we get better at asking questions. So an example of probably not my favorite way of framing a question would be to say something like, why did you do it that way? Now, of course, tone always matters. You could say it really in a very compassionate way, and it could land more softly. But there's something about starting with why, which is okay in most cases, but also the you, which can sometimes make a person feel a bit on the spot. Some people might perceive it as a bit of an attack. They get defensive. And there's one way to soften questions is to just infuse the phrase with might. And how might we do that differently? How might we take what you just offered and extend it to blah, 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 right? Number one, might is conditional. It doesn't sound like we have to do it. We must get it done. You also just pluralized the first person. You took it away from the second person, you, and you said instead we. So it becomes much more inclusive. It doesn't make the person feel as much on the spot. So that's something that I can't emphasize enough how questions just land in a much more progressive way if we frame them as how might we, in that more inclusive tone. The other thing that I learned a lot from Warren Berger, who wrote a great book called A More Beautiful Question, followed up by a book called The Book of Beautiful Questions, is he learned by interviewing the heads of the most innovative companies in our country. What he learned is that they lead with questions. And this is, spoiler alert, the Cliff Notes version of his work is that they start by asking why, in a kind of a self-reflexive way, like, why do we do this? Why do we only hire people from those sorts of schools? Why don't we ever hire anyone over age 40? Why? To then, what if we started hiring people who only have a high school diploma and incredible work experience? What if we, if the question was, why don't we market our products to the Southern Hemisphere? What if we started to sell our products to Brazil, et cetera? And then you start to converge into how questions. How might we do that? Right. So it goes from being very big and expansive in your thinking to getting super tactical and asking for practical next steps.
Wow. I really, really like that. And those are definitely two of the books that are now on my list. I love the question of why. And again, the might, because it sounds like what you're saying is we're treating basically everything as a possible future experiment.
Yes.
Right. It's not that we assume we know anything or know everything. And we're questioning why did we, or how might we, and then having potentially an experiment and not something that's a foregone conclusion, which I think is really hard for certain business leaders sometimes because they get into a position they feel like they got there because they were right about a number of things or they made the right decisions in their careers. Therefore, questioning their gut or their intuition or things like that might be difficult for them. How have you, in working with certain companies, overcome that in the past? And I'm sure that if a company is working with you in with figure eight thinking, they're probably a little bit more open than the companies who are questioning that decision. But how have you, tackled that problem or brought people on board who might have had a struggle with being that open to asking why and how could we, if it conflicts with their intuition?
Well, it first starts with an acknowledgement of how we got there. And one of the big ways that we all have gotten to this place of erring on the side of certainty and needing to feel this pressure of coming up with the solution instead of multiple possible ways of going about things and falling in love with the process. I am from Philly, home of the 76ers, where we like to say, trust the process. We don't tend to be educated in that way. So just first acknowledging how we got there is we're educated in a way where we're supposed to come up with the answer. I mean, think about how tests are standardized. You got to, fill in the dot. It's not about exploring the multiplicity of outcomes. And the truth is that life is gray and businesses are working in market environments. Markets are made up of humans. Humans are inconsistent and not predictable. And therefore, why are we shoving these kind of certain sorts of structures onto an existing system that just doesn't operate that way? Also, organizations are organisms. They're made up of humans. They morph and shape over time. They're like the opposite of how I remember in college, I took a sociology 101 class and had to read a book called The Organization Man by William White. It's like this classic tome about just kind of looking at the history of how we've thought about organizations and corporations. And we basically copy pasted from the factory machine line and then shoved it onto organizations. And that's not working out very well for us. So all of the work that's been done up to this point about servant leadership is all in line with this idea of really encouraging leaders to have this growth mindset. Part of having a growth mindset, which comes from Carol Dweck, is about having this ability to be have self-reflexive inquiry, to really up the game on metacognition. Why do I think the way I think about X, Y, Z? And then being a bit transparent. It's not enough for leaders just to say, I value your questions. Please, let's ask more questions. It has to be modeled for people. People otherwise are going to kind of have their hands on their hips and their arms crossed and figure like, no, you go first. You ask the question first. And then I'll see if there's like a putative result. So when leaders themselves can pose questions about the ways we have been building the business, if they are sharing their self-reflection and then ask others to, there's all sorts of ways we can start to build a culture of inquiry in our organizations. We can, well, back before the COVID-19 quarantine, when we were meeting in person, you can have a wall full of questions and it can be totally anonymous with just post-its of questions that are collected on a wall. You can go from the analog version to have a digital repository of questions. And then you can be intentional about establishing a cadence where you will pick through different questions and actually use them as discussion points. You could have meetings that are just designed around questions or meetings that are just about generating questions. And I'm just riffing just off of, a couple of minutes here, but I'm sure if you and your organization get together, you come up with all sorts of cool and fun ways to start to integrate curiosity into the way that you work and lead.
Yeah, that idea of a question wall is like sparking a lot of sort of side threads in my brain right now because I don't want to use that immediately. And it's so much so that I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Yeah, something you said about, and I'm just going to play back in my mind a little bit here because I had a question, and then you mentioned question wall, and I was thinking about
Yes.
virtual post-it board. Um,
Yes.
that's fantastic. I also love that idea of, and something I'm going to implement myself, of providing the context of where you're coming from and why you think a certain way. I've been doing that a little bit more the last few years. To provide an example, when I'm doing phone screens or interviews in a hiring process, and not just asking somebody, "What's your experience with blah blah blah," but providing the context of, in our organization, here's the history. Here's why we're at where we're at right now. Given that this piece of this job is important, for these
Yes.
reasons, what's your experience with that? But doing that personally and saying, in my experience, every time we've tried XYZ, here are the problems we've run into. I'd like to avoid that. How might
Right.
we? So
Right.
I really love that. And it humanizes your leadership.
It humanizes your leadership. It makes you more accessible because you're being a bit more transparent about the way you are questioning and thinking through things. It shows humility. It just provides an kind of an open door for conversation.
Absolutely, and it humanizes you. It also invites people in because it's storytelling, essentially, and that's
Yes.
It gets people more engaged because we get more engaged in stories than we do barking orders or receiving orders.
That's right.
I really love that too, and just having the list of available questions is fantastic. I had a previous guest on the show who caught me off guard when she said that office hours are kind of have run their course as being useful. And I thought, oh, that seems peculiar. And then she explained that people don't want to come into your big C-suite where everybody's sitting around, when you're all in an office, and be the person, to your point, to raise their hand and ask you a question. Right. So you have to proactively go out to your organization with questions, with your perspective. I love that so much. So, go ahead.
No. Another great way to engage each other is, and I learned this as a qualitative researcher, is to ask people. It's more difficult for people to project into the future. It's a little bit easier for people to reflect back on their own experiences. So even if you frame a question such as, tell me a story about a time when you have had to do X. Tell me a story about a time when you had to negotiate something really challenging, or but you just couching it with the word story instead of a data point, a factoid, an example. But it's a story. It just changes the tone of the question and then the subsequent conversation.
Right, because you don't feel like you're being judged based on the validity or the detail of your answer. It's a story, like you said.
That's right.
And
that's right.
You can jump off of that. And actually, I was about to jump into a question, and I'm going to take a little bit of a sidebar here. What have you found as far as coming up with better questions? What I found in interviewing, for example, so in my sort of side business running hiring education, I find that the first question is usually not the most valuable question. The follow-up questions, what did you learn from that? What did you try that didn't work? What have you seen similar things in trying to ask better questions as an organization, that the questions that stem from your answers to the original question are more valuable or dig deeper, or what have you found?
Yes, I agree with you. That the follow-up questions often lead to better insights. And what is inherent in really good follow-up questions is to be a great listener. It's to not have planned out exactly what you're going to be asking next, but to really be listening. I mean, I'm a big fan of Esther Perel. I have a professional crush on Esther Perel, and I love her podcast. She's a relationship therapist and expert. And she's so wonderful at asking questions. And one of her most poignant ways of asking questions are the following two words: say more, or say more. And it just, sometimes if people start something, they stop, or they stutter and they pause, or they say something for a long time, then they think they're finished, and she just asks them to say more about that. And it's incredible what might come next when you invite people to expand on something that they've referenced.
Yeah. And to what you were talking about earlier a little bit, you're providing space for them to do that, where
Yes.
I think we've been conditioned to, and I know I have this problem. I'm from Pennsylvania as well. And
Nice.
even after spending the last 20 years or so in the South, I still talk like I'm from the Northeast. So I'm trying to get every word in before my time to speak is over. And I think we're conditioned to do that a lot. And so if you provide the space for somebody to say more,
Yes.
then you're getting, I think, probably more authentic answers. Something I read or heard somewhere talked about, if you ask somebody a question, their first answer, like, where do you want to go on your next trip? Their first answer is the canned answer that they've had sort of pre-prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say more, maybe they'll tell you more about that trip. Maybe they'll give you an example somewhere else. Maybe they'll think of, actually, I didn't even know I wanted to go there, but now that you asked me, I want to go to this place. So I love that.
That's right. That's right.
Love
Yeah.
that so
it
much.
requires really engaged, active listening.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things I found about listening, which I'm always working at getting better at, it's really easy. It actually is really easy when you're not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Yes. And that's actually one of the principles of improvisation is really being uniquely rooted in the present. It's not being stuck in the past about, oh, what woulda, shoulda, coulda. It's not projecting to the future about what I want to do next or say next, but it's all about the build. And that's whether you observe the way amazing jazz musicians work and perform, or the way incredible rappers rap and riff, or the way incredible improvisational comedians work. They are willing to give up the plan, and it's much more about the playbook, and it's much more about, okay, they just offered this, so let me try to give that back and then build on this idea. And that's hard to do because we are conditioned much more about inserting our next argument or viewpoint. And it's so important for times like now, where there's so much uncertainty that, plans truly are fiction, and they're fiction because they haven't happened yet. And the better and more comfortable we can get at being rooted in the present and being adaptive, the better off we are. And that actually, I would love to share with your listeners that when I talk about creativity as toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems, I didn't want to just stop there, because I realized it would be helpful if I offered capabilities and ways to exercise that. And so part of the wonder rigor ecosystem is something I call the 3 I's. And the 3 I's are ways to exercise that toggling. And one of those I's is improvisation. Another is inquiry, which we just got finished talking about a ton. And a third is intuition. So inquiry, improvisation, and intuition, those are the ways that we can get better at exercising our ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems.
Awesome. It's like you're reading my notes, because that was one question I wanted to ask you, was how people can start to build that muscle. Yeah, you mentioned creativity as a competency, which I always, in my mind, think of, okay, it's like a muscle. It's like working out. You don't go to the gym once and you're like, I'm done, I'm good. It is something you have to build. So it sounds like those 3 I's are a great way to start to build that muscle a little bit.
Yes.
Awesome. So we're running a little bit short on time here now. I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to make sure that I ask you. So it sounds like from our previous conversation and from reading the book that you largely, in the book and in your consulting work and in some of your other work, have been communicating creativity and its benefits in innovation and in productivity for an organization and productivity for the individual and things like that. But it sounds like there are also other benefits, especially now during COVID and during times that are, to quote a previous guest, VUCA conditions, right? Volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous. It sounds like beyond productivity, which is great for bean counters and people who want to succeed in everybody in an organization, what is an area that you're focusing in on now as far as the benefits of creativity to organizations and individuals?
Yeah. So before COVID became the COVID global pandemic became our collective reality, I was really fond of saying that creativity is a productivity play. And that was really part of my efforts for people to stop treating creativity as this frilly little foo-foo add-on and addendum, but to really understand that creativity has a business ROI. And now I've extended and expanded that to say not only does creativity have a productivity play, but creativity has a well-being play. That when we are engaged and intentional about making space and time for wonder and for rigor, it contributes to our well-being. And I love that more conversations in the popular culture are around well-being and not just wellness. Wellness was so early 2000s, right? Wellness was about, did you take your vitamins? How many steps did you do? Are you going to the gym? What's your BMI, right? It was much more on the physical plane. Well-being is not only
Mhm.
about your physical wellness, but well-being also incorporates your mental health and your emotional health. And COVID, because of the social isolation, because of the stressors, let's just start with people who have lost loved ones and people who've died because of COVID and the trauma of that, the trauma that healthcare workers are going through every day still, to the trauma of financial loss and uncertainty in one's income and jobs, which is the reality for so many people. That takes a toll. That causes a lot of stressors. And Gallup has produced some incredible research about the amount of burnout that people have been experiencing since COVID has started. So, from my perspective, if we make time for all the elements of wonder, which are about being more curious, building empathy for ourselves, awe, pausing, but also leave time for the rigor, which is that deep focus, getting that skill development, which builds confidence over time. All of those things contribute to well-being. They contribute to peace of mind. They raise the endorphins and serotonin levels. They creativity helps to calm us. Creativity helps to engage us and invigorate us in ways that we don't always get from the daily grind. And so, right, this is one additional reason why now more than ever these days of uncertainty are designed for creativity.
It's amazing. And I guess I would just to add to that a little bit to stress to folks that if you don't have the opportunities right now as much to exercise creativity and exercise wonder and rigor in your job, it doesn't have to be job related in order to have those mental health benefits, or sorry,
That's
those
right.
well-being
That's
benefits.
right.
That's great. And also, as you mentioned before, like you gain confidence the more you're actually able to exercise these things. And it sounds like you and I are both of a similar mind on how people will continue to learn skills and develop skills and grow in the future. And it's going to happen not by reading about creativity in a book, even in your book, but by practicing and by doing. Can you speak
Yes.
a little bit in the few minutes we have left around what you see in the future of people's careers and the future of work and how they can continue to learn and develop skills differently from the educational systems that maybe we've had in the past and been used to?
Yeah, I think that I have been, I talked a bit before the recording of this conversation, how I've been saying for a while now that I think we're going to see a return to the apprenticeship model. And I've been collecting signals on the landscape about this. I love really good television, and television is becoming even better with platforms like Netflix. And I observed
Mhm.
in the hit comedy sitcom, excuse me, Blackish, the character Junior, who's the eldest of four children of this African American family who works so hard, where the goal is all their children go on to get a great college education. They're solidly bourgeoisie, middle class African American family, and this teenage son says, "Well, yeah, I know I got into college, but I don't want to go right away. I want to take a gap year." And they're like, "Wait, what? You can't do that. You're supposed to go straight on to college." And he's like, "No, I want to experience a little bit more.
Mhm.
I want to learn by doing." And then around the same time, this other great television show called Big Little Lies uh, uh, was on the networks on HBO, I believe. And there's a scene where a teenage daughter named Abigail is just disgustedly talking to her mom, played by Reese Witherspoon. That character's name is Madeline, that she's not even going to take the standardized tests. She doesn't want to go to college at all. And in fact, she's already gotten a job with a startup. And her mother is mortified because Reese Witherspoon's character didn't even go to college. And she's had her heart and dreams set on her kid going to college. And the reason I point out these two examples is that these are two separate storylines, two different networks, two different groups of writers who are putting in a storyline about Gen Zers, centennials, who are questioning the ROI of higher education. They're questioning the learning model of higher education. They're questioning the sage on stage model. They want to learn by doing. They want to learn experientially. All roads which point to creativity. And so now that we fast forward to COVID, where there's going to be some casualties in higher education for a number of reasons, those institutions of higher education who don't have fat endowments to carry them through may start to explore partnerships, strategic partnerships with the private sector, with practitioners, and identify some creative models and ways of learning that begin to look like a different type of apprenticeship, not the apprenticing of the medieval times, but the apprenticeships of the 21st century, because of the demand to do more learning by doing, and possibly demand also on the supply side to have companies that want more people who will learn on the job a different set of skills.
Yeah, which helps to solve that ongoing job seeker sort of crisis that I see all the time, which is I have a degree and I've got all these things and this is an entry level job and they want 3 years of experience. What the heck, right? You could actually develop that experience through doing. And the challenge, it sounds like, for the parents of Gen Zers is to maybe ask a little more what if and to relax your death grip on what you think your child should be doing,
exactly.
Sort of post high school.
What we might be
That's
projecting great. Onto them. Yes.
Right. Which involves that awareness you mentioned, that self-reflectiveness. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can folks go to learn more about you and the work you're doing? Maybe pick up a resource that can help get them on the path.
So thank you again for inviting me to share some ideas and be in conversation with you. People can go to figure8thinking.com. That's FIGURE, the number 8thinking.com. And there they'll see an opportunity to download a free sample chapter of the Creativity Leap, which hopefully will propel you guys to buy a copy and dig even deeper. But I also would love to share with your guests my Wonder Rigor tip sheet. And there's a short link, which is bit.ly/WR tip sheet. And it's 16 tips and ways on a practical level that you can start to integrate wonder and rigor into your life and work.
Wonderful. And yeah, I will definitely link to the tip sheet and to the Figure 8 Thinking website in the show description, in the show notes. And I could continue this conversation for a very long time and pick your brain until you're probably sick of hearing from me. But again, thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us today. And I'm sure that our audience is going to get a ton out of this. And I can't wait to hear their stories about how they've expressed creativity and how they've grown that in their careers and in their lives. Any other last words for our listeners and viewers before we wrap up?
No, just this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me, and check out the Creativity Leap and let me know your thoughts. Stay in touch.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Natalie. And thank you to everyone who's listening and or watching on YouTube. And until next time, for the Rebase Show, the show for profession with purpose, this is Sean signing off. Cheers. Hey, it's Sean again. I know you thought that was the end of the episode, but just when you thought you were out, we pulled you back in. Just for a minute though, with a few final reminders as we wrap up our time today. First, if you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? By subscribing to the show, you'll get access to every amazing conversation and solo episode in the archives. Everything from the future of work, to going into the business of you, to dealing with stress when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you'll automatically get every new episode right when it gets released. And I don't need to tell you how to do this because you're a podcast listener and you're listening to this show, so you're obviously awesome. Now, if you are enjoying the show, then all I want for Christmas is your 5-star rating and review. And I've made it even easier for you to do so. Just tap the link in the show notes or go to ratethispodcast.com/rebase. Now, every new rating and review makes me feel like the popular girl in school. But more importantly, the podcasts with great reviews are the ones that get featured on podcast platforms. So more people will discover the show and we can continue to grow this movement of profession with purpose. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, and if you're not driving right now or flying a helicopter or performing life or death surgery, then please screenshot the episode and tag me on Instagram at RebaseHQ. Doing just one of these things will absolutely make my day. If you do all three, well, let's just say I'll owe you a huge hug and a high five the next time I see you. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you who's tuning into the show every week and who's joined the Profession with Purpose movement. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.